Welcome back to another episode of Bunker Brothers. We are so excited to come back. Been having a great time doing our picks and doing our battles between some of our Bible characters, and it's just been a lot of fun. And by now, folks are kind of into that, I'm sure, because we've got some more of that to do. But right now, we have an exciting opportunity to talk with some men who have started to minister out of their hearts to people just like us.
That's scary. People just like us.
People just like us, because believe it or not, as we well know, God loves people just like us. I think it was his idea.
That's a good thing. Tonight we have joining us Jason Webb and Shane Fulp from Springs of Hope, U.S. We will give contact information. I'm sure they will give it as we get to talking. That's who we've got with us tonight. Let's get it started.
So, you know how I love to do a lot of talking?
Yes, I do.
So I'm going to try and let other people do a lot of talking. How's it going, Jason Webb? How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, brother. How are you tonight?
Doing so well. And you said you've got your partner with you there.
I do. I've got my best friend and my partner in crime, Shane Fulp, here with me tonight.
See, I like how you say that, because that's very much how Graham and I are. We definitely are the partner in crime kind of thing. Does that work for law enforcement? I think it does. I think it will, yeah. It'll work.
I think as a retired public safety officer, police officer, and firefighter myself, and a chaplain being Jason Webb, partners in crime, I think would fit very well.
It probably fits better with that description than with most people.
In Scripture, in the New Testament, Paul said that he can be all things to all people.
Yes, he can be all people. That's exactly true. The ultimate camouflage, you know, he could do it. Yeah, you're right. And he was like, they was super flexible. Graham, tell me how you discovered or came in contact with Jason Webb in this ministry. I'm curious, because you had to bring me in on that.
Well, Jason actually joined Faith Bunker near the very beginning.
It's a good move.
And I saw his profile picture on Facebook. It looked like an administrative type picture from a public safety organization. So I just sent him a Facebook message one day and said, "Is that who you are? You know, let's talk about this thing." And we got to talking and realized we had a lot in common. Not long after that, he sent me a link to the Springs of Hope Facebook page and website, and we got to talking about it because of some issues I've dealt with personally and professionally that was important to both of us, with PTSD being so prevalent in law enforcement and corrections.
And most people aren't aware of that. That's interesting.
So let's let them talk.
Yeah, let's let them talk. Hey guys, listen. Tell us what's going on. What was that thing that threw you over the edge that made you decide that you wanted to do this? And tell us what this is that you do.
Well, the thing that pushed us over the edge and got us started in this line of ministry exactly, 2 years ago, again, I was in Morganton. We were called public safety officers.
Right.
Police officers and firefighters. We're police officers that ride around with turnout gear in the trunk of the car. And when the house is on fire, we act like volunteer firefighters.
Gotcha.
So that was my role. And of course, of my duties, I ended up getting my neck not completely broken, but broken enough to have to end up having 2 neck surgeries. And about that time, I had never met Jason Webb. When I went out with my first neck surgery, he came on as a chaplain.
Yeah.
Unknown to me. I had no clue. So, as corrections officers, I'm sure you guys can identify with this. When something, like that happens, and you get hurt on the job and you're laid up at home, all your friends that you generally spend 12 to 16 hours a day with, they still have jobs and families that they have to carry on. And,
that's true.
Sometimes you kind of get the feeling like you've been left behind a little bit.
Yes.
You're laying at home and you're in your neck brace and you're having your pity party, and your phone starts ringing. And that's what happened to me. My phone started ringing, and also being, in the line of work you guys are in, if you don't recognize the number, typically you don't answer.
That's right. This is very true.
There's no telling who's going to be on the other end.
Matter of fact, when y'all called tonight, I had to tell him that was Jason's number before he would answer the phone.
I looked down the phone, said Morganton, and he said, "Oh, that's probably Jason." I said, "Okay, I'll answer it."
Gee, thanks, guys.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry for
Because
living.
I sent you his number, and I forgot to send him your number.
Sometimes we live in the foxholes a little bit much, so.
We do.
So you're saying, to meet him, it took you breaking your neck, and then you're having your pity party, and it's a party of one.
And then this number keeps calling, and finally, one day I had enough, and I said, well, somebody's going to get a piece of my mind today.
Which didn't take long.
Yeah, it didn't take very long. But I answered the phone, and he's like, hey, don't hang up. This is Chaplain Webb with Public Safety. And I'm like, Public Safety don't have a Chaplain Webb. And he's like, well, I'm the new guy. And
that would make you the new guy.
So we started talking. And, we formed a friendship. We, found out that, hey, he was blown up in a building at one point in time. Years ago, I worked at the carbon plant here in Morganton, and I was in a building that got blown up.
Right.
He's been through multiple back surgeries. I at the time had gone through 2 neck surgeries, and we bonded over that stuff. And he was ministering to me and building a friendship at the same time, and it has just grown from there. We continued our friendship. When I got on my feet, we started getting out and doing things together.
Right.
And he introduced me to this fella named David Cheney, who's from Busia, Uganda.
Yeah.
And I'll let Jason tell you more about him later, but he came over here for a visit, and he introduced me to him, and, he met my family, and so we started supporting, as Jason and I together started supporting David's ministry over in Busia. He has an orphanage and a school over there.
Wonderful.
And then one day we were talking about, helping all the guys in our area that are going through all these things. It's not just when there's a shooter or a death. I mean, just the day-to-day grind of lives of service, whether you're police, firefighter, EMS.
Yes.
Those things you see horrible things day in and day out, and they can just wear you down. And, whether you classify it as PTSD or just stress of life or the devil getting on your shoulders, the end result seems to be the same. People are going down the paths in these lines of work. Divorces are extremely high. Alcoholism is extremely high.
It's true.
Suicide rates are extremely high. And, it was our goal to reach out and try to help those people in our communities. In our minds, we want to help the people that help people.
And that's what led you guys kind of toward us, and not us as in just Graham and I, but toward men like us. But that's because it's also men like yourself. And, you're right about people having suffering from what they do in jobs where they serve the public or they serve the nation. I've got 2 things that I've got to get out. One, when you were talking about being the everything, being in Morganton, the kind of officer you were, I got laughing inside because I'm from Boone, North Carolina, and I remember the days before there was any 911. And if there was a 911, it wasn't where you were at, okay? And you were very thankful to have a guy in a blue Honda with a little light stuck on top with a tackle box, a fishing tackle box with some gauze in it pull up to treat you. So, so if that's what you got, you were thankful, because that might be the only thing you'd ever get. So,
absolutely.
So the second thing that came through my mind, and right when you mentioned that, was, people that serve this country, they go through a lot. Recently, I went to a training here on Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, which dealt with active shooter, but it also dealt with the timeline after active shooters and how things go on in the community well after these events are actually passed, and how it can really eat a community up.
Exactly. I mean, he said himself that, to die for your friends is the ultimate. I mean, he came and he died for his friends, us, to save our souls from eternal damnation. And we may or may not, going out on the job on a daily basis, actually die for our friends, but we're willing to.
Yeah.
At the same time, when our friends become hurting and lacking in different ways, you don't have to die for that friend to be there and show up and give them a hand up.
That's right. I think that's one of the biggest things about bearing one another's burdens that I'm not saying is lacking from the church. If it was lacking from the church, men and like you and us wouldn't be caring about others. So it's not lacking, but I think people think bearing one another's burdens is just the few handshakes of fellowship at church. Bearing one another's burdens can get gritty.
And I think that segues into one of the main focuses of our group, Springs of Hope. We've put together this program called Labels to Purpose, and it essentially starts out, it's faith-based, and what we want to do is bring these guys and gals together in a group that it's all people that are the people that are on the roof trying to open the holes for the most part.
Right.
They spend their lives opening that roof up to let other people down, but at the end of the day, they've got sunburns and blisters and splinters from tearing open that roof all day long, day in and day out for the past 10 years. And so we've, put this group together because when these people get these issues like that, they get slapped with labels really quick. PTSD being, to me, that's just a label for a lot of different things.
Right.
And we want to turn those labels back into purpose for these people because, as I'm sure you've seen, if we can't do that, if we can't realign their focus, then, we may lose those people. In the organized church, when somebody stops coming to church, they'll call, and then they might send them a letter in the mail, and eventually maybe a women's group or a men's group will go and visit with these people. But, I live in a world that my organized church is about 75,000 people that lives in this community around me.
Ah, that's wonderful.
And, amongst these people, you've got this core group that, not unlike, the apostles that went out and, started spreading the word of Jesus Christ after he passed. These guys are going out and they're spreading the word of goodwill no matter what the media says. When you call and ask for help, they show up. When you need someone to, put out the fire at your house or to come and, rescue your child that, maybe have an anaphylactic shock from a bee sting or, fend off the domestic violence offender. And I'm not going to say he or she because nowadays that's not going both ways.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Those people are out there and they need our help. They need our help now more than ever.
This past Christmas, I had a very bad time. My wife and I were and still are going through some difficulties. And I got to the point from both stress at home and stress at work because in the last 2 years, correctional officers have been under attack, and a lot of them that have been under attack have been friends of mine. And you know as well as I do that you don't have to know the person personally, but when they wear the same uniform that you do and they do the same job that you do and you're about the same age as them, you feel a connection to them regardless of whether you know them personally. With the several deaths and a very close friend of mine getting attacked at Central Prison to the point that he can't work anymore, all of that had built up in me to the point that I literally exploded. And I lost my cool with my wife and my mother-in-law, and I said some things that I regret. And I ended up standing beside my pickup with a gun to my head because I didn't care anymore. It was to the point it was the only way I knew to escape what was going on at that moment. Now, fortunately, because I have a 13-year-old daughter, I didn't do it. I didn't pull the trigger, but I was right there on the verge of it. And so I went to another group that specializes in finding counselors for law enforcement and corrections folks, and got hooked up with a local counselor and went and saw her several times. But the first time I went in, she gave me one of these PTSD inventories. because she specializes in law enforcement military folks. And so she kind of does that as a run-of-the-mill thing. And the second meeting I had with her, when I came in, I was joking with her about it, and she said, yeah, we need to talk about that. And I said, okay, I figured that's why I was here, but, we'll talk about it. And she said, I have never seen anybody with so many yeses on that inventory. She said, the things you have seen, she said, I want to hear some of these stories. She said, there's questions on there nobody's ever answered yes to, and you've got a hard yes there. And I said, yeah, that's kind of comes with being in prison. You see everything. And so, not only from the ministry point of view and the professional point of view, but also from the personal point of view, this is important to all of us.
Absolutely. I mean, and it don't even, you mentioned if they wear the same uniform and the same badge, if you do a convention, yeah, there's going to be some competitiveness. But if you do a convention for police, firefighters, and EMS, right, the firefighters are going to say, hey, you know what police want to be when they grow up? Firefighters.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
It's similar to the Army, Navy, Marine Corps rivalry.
Yeah, right. But if you throw them all in the same, and when I say police, I'm talking city police, county police, highway patrol, corrections officers, anybody that wears a badge and a gun and has to assert authority over some people. And EMS, that's your first responders and the guys that drive, I call them buses. If you threw them all in a convention, in a big convention hall, and got them all to telling stories, their stories are a lot of times going to start to boil down to a lot of similar things.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the horror stories are going to be, the details are going to be different, but there's going to be a lot of similar events that took place. If you're a human being with any kind of a heart, that stuff is going to wear you down. And, when you, especially in like the media today and the way things are, this day and age, the way things are going, every time you turn on television or pick up a newspaper or turn on the internet, you're seeing somebody that's ambushed some police officers. You see somebody that's, coordinated attack on a correctional officer, whether they caught them alone in a cell block. Not long ago, I think it was up in Detroit, they were shooting at firefighters. They were setting fires and sitting back and shooting at them and killed one.
Yeah, that was actually part of the training we did at Seymour Johnson for the hospital was actually fire as a weapon, and we discussed some of those very things about fire being used to draw people off and to inflict harm on firemen, on men trying to. That's bizarre to me, but it should be bizarre to me. But it's horrible.
Well, the elements that do that, they see a uniform and a badge.
Yeah,
that's true.
And as a father myself, I did foster care for 18 years. My wife and I did. I have my youngest son is still active duty U.S. Air Force. My oldest son works at a mental health facility here in Burke County, and his wife is a corrections officer in Rutherford County.
you got the bases covered, don't you?
Yeah, not only amongst myself. This is my personal family, my innermost circle family. My you guys, are now that I know your names, you're in, my outer circle of family. And these things, just like you said, you had all these people that were near to you and dear to you, whether you personally knew them or not. It weighs on you to the point where some people at certain times, have specific events like you may have had happen to them, and they're like, you know what, enough is enough. Without organizations out there to help get counselors, and without those counselors, and without radio broadcasts like this, I said radio, yeah, I'm old.
It's okay.
It's okay.
We'll put this down on videotape.
We'll send you a cassette.
We might put that as a blooper at the back of the thing.
But I believe that's what we have in common. That's why Jason and I are doing what we're doing. That's why you are doing what you're doing. We have a heart for these people, and it's the same heart that in ministry Jesus Christ had for the entire world. And that's the legacy that he left for us, to do these things for our brothers and sisters and not ourselves.
That's exactly right. Yes, exactly right. We're talking with Jason Webb and Shane Fulp. They work with springsofhopeus.org, and we've been talking to them about what they're doing, where their heart of ministry is at, and we've been having some really good sharing. One of the things that I definitely wanted to ask Webb was this question, and it's been on my mind. How easy is it for people who are law enforcement or in a Leo situation or first responders, or how easy is it for them to trust a minister, a chaplain? I knew you would laugh.
That's a joke, right? I've been doing this for 3 years, and had I not carried some of the same scars that these guys do, I don't know that all of them would trust me yet. Shane mentioned earlier that we had both been blown up. The company that he worked for, the building he was in, blew up. The chemical plant I worked at blew up. Shane's neck was broken. My back was broken. Yes, I'm a minister. Yes, I've got tattoos.
That's okay.
Hey,
we don't judge.
Hey, you know what? If they don't either.
I wear a kilt. We can move on from there.
Hey, look,
We both wear a kilt, so.
We're Scottish.
hey, I'm Scotch-Irish, so there you
Awesome.
go. Biggest thing is to be available, be relatable, and be consistent. And every one of the guys that I work with, when I'm out in a car with them, if we are out on a call, they know that I know where my place is, and they also know that if things go sideways, as it was explained to me, we'll worry about the paperwork later.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a trust factor there. And then the fact that Shane and I are as tight as what we are, that goes a long way with the guys in the department also. Some of the guys have gone shooting with me and can see me shoot. The fact that Shane has trained me some, and I've always had a natural inclination to be able to at least know which end of the gun to point down range.
And that's not always a given nowadays.
Graham just got done doing some training on the range like today, and he texted me before he went in because, well, he might tell you why, he might not tell you why. My advice to him was to say uprange.
Yeah.
I'm an instructor full time for corrections now, and every Tuesday I have the in-service class on the range doing their yearly qualification.
They always do a great job.
And it's always going in. I hope these dingbats can shoot today.
Yeah,
Because-
bless your heart, because I was the same instructor myself.
Well, on that, and of course I can't help get light a little bit now and then. Graham texted me about that, and he said something that I hope they do well today. And I told him, I said, you'll know which ones do well. The ones who will do well go bang bang, and the ones who do bad will be going pew pew. But when we played cops and robbers, or we played army, okay, I have never yet fallen to a kid who put his fingers up in the shape of a gun and went pew pew at me, okay? But I have taken out many an 8-year-old by a good solid bang. Dropped them like flies. What would you say just right now to correctional officers who think that religion is for the inmate?
And from personal experience, I started out about 6 years ago launching a prison ministry through my church at the minimum security facility here in Burke County. And on our way in, we always made sure, before we ever got back to see the inmates, we always made sure every officer along the way, we stopped, we asked how they were doing and how we could pray for them.
Well, I'll tell you, we there's a church here that does a similar ministry, and it's namely for the inmates. But I will tell you, when they come out to feed the inmates on that one day a year, they always feed the staff first. And you would be amazed how appreciative the staff is of that. Because most of the time they get left out all the way around. And this group, while they're here to minister to the inmates,
But let's be blunt. I had a woman tell me one time, straight up to my face, she did not see how I could be a Christian and be a correctional officer.
oh, I've heard that.
And I am Pauline, born in the Pentecostal fires of the mountains of North Carolina, in an apostolic family that established churches for the kingdom of God. And she told me that I wasn't a Christian because I was a correctional officer. And I'm telling you, the Word of God says that the reason why the sword is in the hands of people like us who do have hearts for God is so we'll do the right thing with it.
Because listen, the key to it is you have to be the same yesterday, today, tomorrow, and always. And if if people can see that, and if guys coming in to try to minister at your facility, if we treat the COs one way and we treat the inmates another way, where's our accountability? If we treat guys on the outside of the fence different than we treat the guys on the inside of the fence, where's your accountability?
So we like that word accountability. By the way, that's one of the pillars of Faith Bunker, is accountability. A little plug there for us.
Yeah.
But we believe in accountability because that's what keeps us from losing it. That's really, accountability is really built around the brotherhood and sisterhood of faith in that church triumphant that exists across the whole entire world, both here and those who have already gone on to glory. That's a massive amount of people, really, that witness together of the glory that God has given, but some days it doesn't feel like it.
Well, I want to chime in for a second on what do you think about corrections officers who say that religion is for the prisoners?
Yes, sir.
Inmates only. Okay. Then, I would have to say, based on personal experience with similar situations, that, that might be the person that has conviction on their heart, but they're still resisting it to the point to where they're basically lashing out at it, almost like the people whom you invite to come to worship service or prayer meetings, and they say, well, half the people that are there are nothing but drunks and liars and hypocrites.
And that's the point.
I'd hope so. It's a church. Oh, but no, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But they're going to lash out at it.
Yeah, that's right.
They feel some conviction when you've been convicted. I've been convicted. And I can tell you, I've been convicted to do things that I didn't want to do because it would require me to move my rear end and to admit that I have made mistakes and failed in certain places. And, the human part of you tends to want to just kind of lash out any way you can at it and bat it down and make it go away.
Yes, and I think that's a tactic that the human does, let alone Satan trying to do that. I think we do that a lot on our own.
Once we start, he'll get in our ear and just encourage what's going on. And that's people who would say that would be someone who possibly has some serious convictions about themselves and, may need to be revisited the day after the prayer meeting. And, go meet them on their turf, Meet him at the golf course, meet him on the riverbank, have some different conversations. And that's these LTP groups that Jason and I are putting together is a place for that type of thing to happen.
So we've talked about where you came from. You're both involved in law enforcement. What is the program for Springs of Hope? What are you looking to do specifically for these people?
Yeah, what are you going to do to us?
We're going to rewire your brain.
Please? That doesn't sound all that bad to me right now.
In a sense, we really are. Guys, I know that sounds kind of sadistic to a point, but that's what the whole LTP program is about.
I don't mind the idea because if you've worked in this kind of environment and your brain's being wired anyway. It's being wired a different way all the time, and you've got to do something different.
Right. And so, we think about the first part of LTP, and we think about the L part of it, and that's labels. Shane mentioned PTSD, and that being really just a big umbrella label for a lot of different conditions. We've got anxiety. We have panic attacks. We have, depression. We have, whether we want to admit it or not, we have suicidal thoughts from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
We have all of these negative connotations that we put on ourselves because we are labeled with PTSD. Then we have labels that society puts on us. And this is where things really get interesting because society will look at, for example, this guy that Shane and I know, we will call him John. And John was involved in an officer-involved shooting. John was forced to return fire on a juvenile.
Right.
Oh, God.
His dwelling with a pistol and was shooting at the shift sergeant.
Right.
After multiple repeated attempts, drop your weapon, I will shoot, drop your weapon, drop your weapon. He turned the firearm towards John, and John pulled the trigger and killed the young man.
Oh, yeah.
So now he's a child killer.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So now he's broken. Now he's unfixable. Now he's unrepairable. Now he is untrustworthy. Now he's unsafe. Now he's all of these things.
And he may or may not be.
Exactly.
You know, the problem that I see with the media right now is they don't give a story time to develop and find out what the facts are before they make up the story.
Correct.
I mean, I'll be the first to say that sometimes the police officer or the corrections officer or whoever it may be is in the wrong. But at least give the story a chance to develop before you decide they're in the wrong.
Let all of the facts out before the story is ever put forth. That's the way it should be. Unfortunately, that's not the way that it is. So we look for individuals like John. And there are 3 tenets to our program and to the company as a whole. 3 pieces of scripture that Springs of Hope is governed by. And this is what we operate off of.
And I really am looking forward to you sharing this, and I'm taking notes.
Okay, terrific. Now, if you need extra crayons, let us know. We'll have some on the way.
I'm using a Bic Grip Roller Micro. It's wonderful.
You know, I had one of those, I thought, at one point, but it turned out to be a Bic razor, and it was the yellow-handled one.
Oh, listen to that.
It didn't last too long.
Yeah. Well, you know, correctional officers and their pens. They're like an extension of our body.
Right. That's true. So, the first one is out of Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 7. And this is the parable of the lost sheep. And this is where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. And he finished speaking. And the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together, and then, the parable continues there. But so that the key portion of this piece of scripture for us is to leave the 99 and go to find the one. The one will not come to us. The one has to know that there's a place, and I hate to use this term. I hate it. Like getting a toenail yanked out with a pair of pliers, but the term safe space. And it's because the millennial generation and a certain political side have taken those 2 words and have put them on such a negative connotation now.
Well, I think that really that's just a terminology expressing what we would look at as the word sanctuary. The idea of that's the term for it. That is the right term. But taking away the politically correctness of it, having a place that you are under less or no threat than you alone pose to yourself to deal with things.
Correct. So we try to provide that. We go in, whether it's through the recommendation of a friend, or whether it's through a family member, or it's a coworker, or maybe it's someone that will hear this broadcast and come out and say, "You know what, I need help," and that realization finally hits, and then they reach out to us either through our Facebook page at springsofhope.usa or through emails or our website. There are ways to get in touch with us, or maybe it's another group, or or someone that work provides. That one has to be found.
Right.
Then the second point is Mark chapter 5, verses 25 through 34. So this is the story of the lady that had the bleeding condition.
Oh, yes.
She had all of these labels, and this verse really is the crux of the program. This is where the conversion happens from the negative labels to finding a purpose. This is the change. This piece of scripture, the lady had been called unclean. She had been called untouchable, unlovable.
Right.
All kinds of words like that, right? Hurtful words, words that ostracize her from her family, that ostracize her from her friends, from her community, from her church. She reached out in faith, touched Jesus' cloak, and was healed, right? But that is not the focal point of this verse for us. The focal point of this verse for us is when Jesus looks at her and says one key word.
We're on the edge of our seats, man. We're dying here. The key word.
I'm waiting. Here's the cliffhanger. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, it's cliffhangery.
He says, daughter.
Wow.
Okay.
Huh.
He gave her identity.
Wow.
He gave her her sense of self-worth. He gave her love in that one word. Because people for so long, the scripture says that it had been 12 years.
Yeah, 12 years.
You know, that is unbelievable.
Yes, it
is.
And
one word, he restores her. He could have looked at her and he could have said, you, or he could have said, woman.
Right.
Neither of those are terms of endearment. Neither of those, will give her the same sense of self-worth as it did when he looked at her and said, daughter. And so we take COs, we take vets, we take PSOs, we take EMTs, whoever, and like we'd look at you and say Graham instead of man, or instead of broken, or instead of useless,
or instead of officer or sergeant,
or CO.
Right.
Because so many times people in this line of work, they label themselves as, I am officer so-and-so, I am sergeant so-and-so, I am firefighter so-and-so. And we do it to ourselves a lot of time, but that becomes our identity.
Well, I lost my first name. And I'm not complaining about the fact of using my last name. That's not it. But when I got out of the prison, people were addressing me with my first name, and I was not answering.
Right.
I don't know who is Daniel. Officer Audette, I know.
Right.
But who's this Daniel guy? And they would call me on the radio at other jobs, and they'd be calling for Daniel, and I never answered.
Yeah.
Never answered.
Even with that being said, there's still a close-knit circle.
Yes.
That when they call you Audette, it's like they call me Webb or they call Shane Fulp.
That's right. That's right.
It's still that close inner circle. But this is even further out than that. Like you said, now people, you've gone back to Daniel. Graham goes to Andrew. Or
that still sounds weird.
It does, doesn't it? But, so we're looking at it, as a type of identity. And I say this next line kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's very true, and Shane will vouch for this. There is a group of officers at headquarters that call me Pastor Cop.
Oh, yeah, right.
And
I get it.
And, and it's because these guys know that if I've got to come out of a car, I'm coming out of a car. There's that trust factor built in, and we're family. But outside of that group, my wife will call me that, joking around sometimes. Oh, hey, I almost got pulled today, but I knew Pastor Cop would get me out of the ticket.
Wow. Come on now.
Right? Okay, so moving from the identity and the restoration of identity, the third one, we're going Old Testament, going to the prophet Jeremiah.
Whoa, one of our favorites.
And this verse I actually have tattooed on my left arm. This was the power verse that got me through my work. Or actually, no, this got me through cancer. It's Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 11 through 13.
Jeremiah is a long name, Graham. That's a long name.
I'm failing over here, Jason. Sorry.
Jerry MY-EYE-AH.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay.
Right?
Anyway, Jeremiah 29:11 through 13.
Yes. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Well, when you have hope and a future, what do you have? You have a purpose.
Yes, you do. That's right.
When you have a purpose, you have something to live for.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Graham,
That's one of the most amazing things that God gave to us when He created us as people, and that's the ability to have purpose. God is a God of purpose. He's a God of action and purpose. People imagine eternity as being a purposeless existence, and I have never seen it that way. I'm planning on learning every instrument I can lay my hands on, inventing a few others. I'm planning on going to concerts to hear David play the Psalms. I'm expecting, there's going to be a lot of activity, a lot of enjoyment, and a lot of things done.
And I would like to add to that one thing that a purpose prevents are the situations where someone becomes helpless and hopeless. You can be helpless and still have hope. You can be hopeless and still get help. But when you are helpless and hopeless, you're without a purpose. And when you're without a purpose, that's when that firearm goes off.
Right. God, when God made the world, and forgive me for getting all theological, Graham, but this is a big thing to me because when my mother, she shares how she got saved, and she often puts it in the terms of the creation story, that she was a person without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and then God's Spirit moved upon the waters. That's how she'll describe it for her own salvation. But drawing from that in my life, it got me the fact that when God made this world, the Word of God says He didn't make it to remain. You could say one way of rendering it, to not remain purposeless, but to have a purpose, not to remain empty, but to be filled. And people who are just empty and broken need to be filled and filled with purpose. And I get what you're saying. Because when people get to the point where something's wrecked inside them, then truly it's just like in Genesis, they are in darkness, and that darkness is over that deep. And what does it take for that to change? It takes the movement of God's Spirit, and that's going to take individuals that are moving in the Spirit and knocking on those hearts. And you're one of those, right? And others as well.
Yeah, you just paraphrase what LTP is.
Please forgive me. My mom's the one that this is something she's a preacher, right? She is, and she tells a story, and I get it. I've had that darkness upon the face of the deep experience, where I was in the void, and if it hadn't been for the moving of God's Spirit, which was in this case through some key family members and through some friends, I don't know if I would have come back out of that void to then be able to be reshaped by God into something that has purpose, that now can have a point to have life and give life.
Right. And that's the whole point to our labels to purpose groups are to help shine light on that purpose for other people. And a lot of times that light is shined by someone sitting next to them that has had a similar experience.
That's right.
And we're working with, we've got some counselors we're working with, and when we identify, certain issues in the group, we can only scratch the surface as far as clinical things go, because I'm not a PhD. And Jason, as much as he wants to be, he's not a psychologist. So, we those things we have partners, and we refer those things to the partners. But in the groups themselves, just like your mother said, we help shine some light in that dark area. And most people, and I think you probably agree with this, most people, when they see that little bit of light and they get that little glimpse of hope, they will grab onto it and build upon it themselves.
That's exactly right.
Part of the way that we have built this LTP, like Shane said, comes from the guy sitting next to the guy. That is how, as he expressed earlier, he and I met, and that's one way that we built our relationship. And the other part of that, when he mentioned the surface level stuff, when the plant blew up that I was in, there was a fireball that came directly at my office window. And this thing was probably 25, 30 foot in diameter.
Wow.
And so for 6 months, I wasn't able to look out of a window.
Oh man.
Wow.
2.5 years later, I still had trouble lighting my gas grill to even grill a hamburger, because the gas would pocket up. And when the gas would pocket up and the igniter would finally catch, it would flare, and I'd be back in the office before the concussion hit me. And, then the whole flashback would come back. I'd relive every minute of it. And then I developed a system to be able to hit the igniter button using one of the grill utensils, which gave me an extra 20 inches to the end of my 3.5 foot arm, so I could reach it from almost 5 feet away.
Wow.
to be able to ignite it. So I was away, and my head was as far away as possible from the grill. And then slowly I worked towards, now I just go out and light it. But I'm 13 and a half years past the experience.
Right. I get what you're saying. When it came to the industry that we're in, I started out as a security officer, sort of Graham, back at that time. And I feel for you. I didn't have a ball of fire, but I did have the front end of a Chevy. And I had a guy who tried to, and when I talk about it even now, I kind of get weird feeling because I am one of the officers, the loss prevention officer, was pursuing a guy who was a shoplifter. We didn't know he had a partner. The partner was in a car. He cranked it, hit the gas pedal, and before I could do anything, I was 3 feet off that bumper.
Right.
And all he did was look. I swear, when people talk about time slowing down, it's no joke. It's no joke.
Like,
in fact, I could live in that moment, and that's a horrible thing because it speeds so slow when you think about it. Because when I look at it, I can see the driver, I can see the guy sitting beside of him, I can see them look at me, I can see the bumper, and I can see the look in their eye that came across their face when they decided that they were going to run me down. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to talk about, and because my ears hear the pedal obviously being hit to the floor, and the engine just roared, and that 3-foot bumper closed on me, and I threw myself into the air. There was an SUV beside me. There was nowhere for me to go.
Right.
And I ended up making contact with the hood of that vehicle. I latched onto anything I could hold on to, and had I not done that, I would have been run over. Period. Then when I saw I was clear of vehicles on the left side, I rolled off that vehicle and hoped that they did not turn around and come back. And I was full of fear because these guys could turn around and finish the job. I could not walk into the parking lot for a solid couple years. I would pursue. It turns my gut thinking about it when I think about it now, because I would pursue shoplifters, and as soon as they would step into the parking lot, I would freeze on the sidewalk. Just freeze. Not even a conscientious stoppage of me pursuing. Just my body did not go forward. I don't talk about that too much because people joke about, you remember T.J. Hooker, the famous scene of him hanging on the front of a car, go back to really old classic TV, right? But
right.
I swear to you, I was not trying to stop that vehicle with my body. It doesn't work. The cars win every time. On that note, and I'm not trying to be mean, because remember, my deflection is humor. So on that point, I have a mix of Fulp. I want to know, why did the fireman steal my radio? Because I had this brand new radio. It never came back. EMS got there. They got there. They picked me up. They picked up my radio. My radio never returned back to that mall.
It was better than what they had. Man, live a hard life.
That's a cop joke if I've ever heard one. We've been talking to Jason Webb and Shane Fulp, both from springsofhopeus.org. They have a website. They have a Facebook page. Their email addresses are findable on the website. Jason is jason.webb@springsofhopeus.org. Shane.fulp@springsofhope.us. No, that's not right either.
Some of this may be edited, but again,
I hope a lot of it's edited.
I like to pick some bloopers now and then and put them at the very end, and I wait. The last blooper I put on was my blooper. So
it's my turn.
Graham's turn to have a blooper. I like that one. That's a good one.
Shane.fulp@springsofhopeus.org.
Awesome.
I said it right that time. We know that all of us came from a law enforcement, public safety background, and those are the guys y'all are out to help along with military folks. Thank you for what you're doing, what you're going to do. I hope this ministry lasts for many, many years and on well past the two of you.
Well, I hope that our ministry all ends at the rapture of the church. Pretty well. Mine will.
Let's have it last for many, many years.
Yes. As we're getting here in this spot, I think I want to ask you, gentlemen, take me down to the fire. Take me down, sit me down just for a minute. Let's just imagine that I'm up there with you guys and we're out and we're by the fire. What are you going to tell me? What can I hear from you? I'm by the fire. I finally opened up a little bit. What can you tell me? Put me beside that fire right now so our audience can sit with us around that circle right this minute in a safe spot right now and just hear what you guys have to administer. What would you say?
The most important thing that I could tell you sitting around the campfire with us would be to remember in the book of James where he says to count it all as joy when you face trials of various kinds. And then the reason that we face these trials comes from Malachi 3, where Malachi writes that God sits as a purifier and the refiner of silver. And I want you to think of yourself as that block of silver and think about your trials that James tells us produces steadfastness and produces perseverance. I want you to think of your trials as the fire that God puts the block of silver into. And the way that the refiner of silver knows that the silver is 100% pure is that he can see his own reflection in the silver. So when you go through these storms, when you go through these trials, when you continue to be tested and you continue to be broken and humbled and you continue to hurt, know that it's not the end. It's a step in the process. And that step in the process is being done by the hand of the one that created it all, the one that sent his son to die on that cross for you so that you would have the opportunity to spend eternity with him.
Wow. Wow, that's fireside worthy right there.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's
So
a
now-
very powerful, powerful message. We really, really appreciate both of you gentlemen coming and just laying bare this with us tonight. Thank you so much for being our guests here with us. We want to encourage all of the men and women that were listening to reach out and stand together and seek the help that the family of God is. God's trying to bring this help to your life. He's opening these avenues up because you're his son and you're his daughter, and we just really are so excited to get to be a part of this, just beginning that conversation and encouraging our audience to reach out and look outside of themselves to what God would have for them. And it's just been such a pleasure to get to speak with you guys.
And we've covered a lot of serious material today, and it is very serious, and those of us who have lived it, all four of us in different ways, we know how serious it can be. But I've got a question that's probably a little less serious, and that is, when are the four of us getting together and having pizza?
Hey, brother, that's on our minds too.
Because I'm a little nervous to find out where this would actually go in person, but I'm a little intrigued by it also.
We're probably going to get thrown out of the establishment.
Yeah. On that note, I was talking to my wife. My wife is a great lady, but she was like, I said, yeah. I was talking a little bit about you guys. I said, yeah, these guys got a ministry, and they get people out and they kind of get them out in the woods and get talking. And she goes, oh, well, that's just like one of the murders I just read about. They get you out of the woods. I said, honey, you've got to stop looking at that stuff. That's not what these guys are doing.
So listen, so here's what you tell her, right?
Yeah.
You tell her that you're going to have movie and date night at home one weekend.
Yeah.
And you go down to Redbox and you pick up the movie Last House on the Left.
Oh, no!
And you say, oh, by the way, I'm going to the mountains next weekend to go hang out with Jason and Shane.
That is good. That is good. Well, gentlemen, this brings us to an end of another episode of Bunker Brothers. We thank you so much for listening, all the folks listening. Thank you so much for your support. Be sure to check out the other fantastic episodes that we have. I always speak them up because, hey, if you can't upspeak your own thing, I mean, no one's going to listen to you, right? And but we've been here together to have a great time. And Graham, we're going to be back probably next episode. I think we have another matchup. Am I correct? Another matchup of Bible.
It may be a matchup, or we have discussed doing a profile on C.S. Lewis. I don't know that we've decided which one we're going to do yet.
Lewis? Okay. I mean, I'm game. I mean, I've actually read at least 2 out of 3 of his science fiction books, and I'm currently reading Screwtape Letters, and I'm going to tell you, that is one messed up book, and I love it to bits. I just absolutely love it. All right, folks, thanks so much for listening. God bless you. We encourage you all to reach out. Have a good one.